The microphone left his hand at head height, thrown hard across a live television stage at the face of a seated man, and the seated man did not move. He did not catch it, did not duck it, did not so much as uncross his legs. Bruce Lee watched the thing spin past his cheek, close enough to feel the air of it, let it clatter away into the dark behind him, and kept his eyes the whole time not on the microphone but on the man who had thrown it. Because the microphone did not matter. The man throwing it had just told Bruce everything he needed to know, and none of it was good for the man throwing it. To understand how a talk show booking ended with a thrown microphone and a killed feed, you have to go back about 8 minutes to a large man in black who had walked onto that stage, certain he was about to have a very good night. He was a big man, and a genuinely trained one, that has to be said, because the story is not about a fraud, and it does not work if you imagine one. He was an accomplished practitioner of a real grappling and joint-locking art, a man who had gone abroad and spent years earning rank in a hard tradition that did not give it away, and everything he could actually do, he could actually do. He had come onto the program to promote himself, riding a wave of attention in his signature black, his hair pulled back, moving with the slow certainty of a man who has never once, in his adult life, been physically doubted in a room. That certainty was real, and it was earned, and it was also the exact thing that was about to destroy him, because a man who has never been doubted has also never learned what he does when the doubt finally comes. If you want to understand how that certainty turned into a thrown microphone, stay with this, because it did not break all at once. It broke the way pride always breaks, one small crack at a time, and the small man in the chair beside him did not put a single one of those cracks there on purpose. That was the thing that made it unbearable for the big man. He came out looking for a rivalry and could not get one. The host, delighted to have two martial artists on the same couch, kept teeing up the comparison, who would beat whom, whose art was superior, and the big man rose to every one of them, and the small man in the black jacket declined every one of them, warmly, with a kind of easy grace that could not be bumped. He praised the big man's art. He said joint control was real and beautiful and worth a life's study. He said there was no such thing as a superior style, only styles that were more or less complete, and that he had spent his own life trying to fill the holes in his own. Every gracious word landed on the big man as a different insult, because you cannot start a fight with a man who keeps handing you compliments, and being unable to start a fight in front of 11 million people was the one thing the big man's certainty could not survive. The host, sensing the current, asked the big man to demonstrate something, a little control technique, nothing serious. And here is where the evening tilted. Stay with this, because the demonstration was where the big man decided to force the thing the conversation would not give him. He asked to show a wrist lock, and the small man, agreeable as ever, offered his hand, and the big man applied it correctly, with real skill, a genuine lock, and expected the famous fighter to wince, to tap, to be seen on national television bending to his control. The small man did not wince. He did not resist either, which is the thing that makes a lock work. He simply let his hand travel with it, soft following the pressure so that it never arrived anywhere, and then, mild as milk, with his free hand, he reached up and laid 2 fingers against the side of the big man's neck, light, unhurried, a place where in a real exchange a strike would already have landed, and then took the fingers away and let his trapped hand flow back out of the lock as though it had never been caught. He did it without heat, almost kindly, and he said something quiet that only the desk mic caught, something to the effect that control of one hand is a wonderful thing, but that a man has more than one hand, and so does his opponent. The audience laughed, not at the big man exactly, but in the delighted, released way an audience laughs when it has just watched something clever it did not see coming. And that laugh was the last crack. It is one thing to be outmatched in private. It is another to be made to look for 1 second like the student instead of the master, on live television, with the studio lights on you, and the laughter of 11 million strangers going into you like a blade. He had built his whole self on never being that man. And now, in front of everyone, he was that man, and the certainty that had held him together for years came apart all at once, the way a dropped glass is fine and then an instant later is not. He stood up. And in one furious motion, with no plan and no craft, only the raw need to make the small man react the way words and locks had failed to make him react, he seized the microphone off the desk and hurled it hard across the stage at Bruce Lee's face. The host came half out of his chair with his mouth open, one hand flinging up on reflex. The audience made a single sharp sound, a whole studio inhaling at once. In the front rows, people recoiled in their seats. Up on the bandstand, the drummer half rose behind his kit. A woman near the aisle had both hands over her mouth. 11 million people at home leaned toward their televisions in the same instant because everyone, everywhere, understood what they had just seen a man do, and every one of them braced for the small man in the chair to be hit in the face. And the small man in the black jacket did not move. Here is what almost nobody understood in the moment, and stay with this, because it is the whole hinge of the night. A thrown microphone is not a dangerous attack to a man like Bruce Lee. It is information. The instant it left the big man's hand, Bruce knew three things: that the big man had lost his composure completely, that a man who has lost his composure has also lost all of his craft, and that whatever came next would be as readable as a headline, because rage has no disguise. So he did not waste a motion on the microphone. He let it pass, a fraction of stillness, a thing that photographs as arrogance, and is actually the deepest kind of calm, and he watched the man, not the object, because the man was the only real thing on that stage now. And here is the part worth staying for, because having thrown the microphone and gotten no reaction at all, the big man did the thing that rage always does next. The thing that would finish him. He crossed the space to the chair fast, for all his size, reaching for the small man with both hands, everything he had, to seize him and control him, and salvage the night with force. He never reached him, because the small man was already up out of the chair, had been rising in fact since before the microphone had finished its flight, reading the whole sequence a full beat ahead. This is the thing about real speed that people who have never seen it up close do not understand. It is not mostly in the hands. It is in the eyes and the mind, in seeing the attack being decided before it is launched, so that by the time the big man's body committed to the lunge, Bruce had already spent that stolen beat, getting to exactly the right place. What the audience saw was not a technique they could follow. They saw the big man lunge at an empty chair. Bruce was simply not in it. He had come up and to the side, inside the reaching arms, into the one place a big committed man has no power and no vision, and from there, in the time it takes to blink twice, he did the thing that made the big man regret every second that had led up to it. He did not injure him. He was faster than that, and better than that. He caught the driving momentum of the lunge and helped it exactly where it was already going, took the balance the big man had thrown away with his own rage, and put him down hard, controlled, complete, onto the floor of the stage between the chair and the desk, a large man in black suddenly flat on his back on live television, blinking up at the studio lights with a small man standing over him not even breathing hard. It was over in about 4 seconds, and it was so fast and so total that the audience did not cheer, because you cannot cheer a thing you have not finished understanding. The host was on his feet. The floor director was already slashing a hand across his throat, and Bruce Lee looked down at the man on the floor, the man who had thrown a microphone at his face on national television, and did not gloat, and did not offer the warm hand these stories usually end with, because a man who throws objects at people does not get the warm hand. What he did instead was say one thing, quietly, just for the two of them, and the people close enough to the stage swore to its shape for years. He said that a real master never has to throw anything, because a real master is never that afraid. Then the feed cut to black. They killed it from the booth, of course they did. A guest had just physically attacked another guest and been dropped on the air, but the killing came a few seconds too late, because the whole eastern half of the country had already watched it happen live in real time before anyone in the control room understood that the thing on their monitors was not a bit. West of the mountains, on the delay, the audience came back from an early commercial to a subdued host and one empty guest chair and no explanation at all. East of them, 11 million people had seen a microphone thrown and a large man put on his back in 4 seconds and were already reaching for their telephones. The big man was not hurt. That was the strangest part, the part people kept coming back to. There was not a mark on him. He got up on his own because no one helped him, and he walked off the stage past the desk without looking at the host, and he was gone before the commercial ended. The whole physical cost of the thing to his body was nothing. The cost to everything else was total, because 11 million people had watched the untouchable man touch nothing, throw a tantrum with a microphone, and get folded onto the floor by a man he outweighed by 100 pounds, all in less time than it takes to read this sentence. The host, who had spent 20 years handling disasters on live television, handled this one by not handling it. He did not make a joke, and he did not explain. When the show came back, he simply said to the camera that they'd had a little excitement, and that he'd been doing this a long time and had never seen anyone lose an argument quite so completely by refusing to have it. And then he moved on, because that was the job, and the segment closed over the empty chair like water. And that was the thing the big man carried out of the studio and could never set back down. Not a bruise, not a broken bone, nothing his body would remember at all, only the knowledge delivered in 4 seconds in front of the whole country that everything he had believed about himself had a flaw under it after all, and that a man half his size had just shown him where it was. The story outlived the tape. The network buried the full footage the way networks do, and for years it was one of those things people had heard about and could not quite prove, a thing traded among people who worked in television. But the ones who had been in the studio never needed the tape because they carried the thing itself, and when they told it, they never led with the fall, fast and final as it was. They led with the 4 seconds before it, with a man in a chair who had a microphone thrown at his face on live television by someone twice his size, and who did not flinch and did not catch it, and did not even uncross his legs, because he had already understood in the half instant it left the other man's hand that the throw was not a threat, it was a confession, and that the surest sign of who is really dangerous in a room is not the man who reaches for something to throw. It is the one who never once feels the need to.